Welcome to Calm, Clear Conversations. I'm Christopher Johnson with Calm, Clear Communications. And with me today, none other than him in the hat, Henry Pfeiffer.
Hello, hello. How are you, good sir?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am blessed. No complaints. No complaints.
All right. So, for those watching, whether you are watching live or whether you're watching the replay, leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching and what questions you may have. Now, our topic today is dev build. What exactly is dev build?
Actually, DevU.
Dev
Uh,
you.
DevU.
I
Yes.
apologize.
No, it is all good. So DevU is a uh business that was started between myself and my best friend. Actually, a few years ago, it started out of just a need. We had a couple of individuals who wanted to learn Java as a language. And my best friend, he knows Java, and so he was like, "Hey, we should set up a class, and we should train these individuals on Java." I know nothing about Java. I'm a C# developer by trade. So it's like, well, let me do some reading, and we can hop in there. And so we developed a curriculum. We piloted it with these individuals. We got an overwhelming response of like, this is what we needed. We love your training style. You were able to like break things down so it's palatable for us. And so then we used that, and then we just kept going, and we've been offering it for free for like the last 3 years. We've trained hundreds of people in C# and Java. Now we're doing Python, all for free. And our goal is he's big into the community, and I'm big into teaching and developing individuals. And so our goal is we want to bring access and opportunity to those who are underrepresented and not uh, in the field. And so we want to bring that access and opportunity to them so that they can find a way into the field that's non-traditional.
So, I got to say, when you said you had the opportunity to teach Java, but you didn't know it,
Hmm.
no better way to learn than to teach somebody else.
Truest words ever. Yes, I agree.
And so now you're teaching Python. Okay. Um, and these courses are free.
Well, so they started out free. Now we're getting to the point where we want to grow the business and be able to offer more courses to others. And so, and able to scale, we need to be able to employ and pay other individuals. So it's never really for us. It's more of we want to help the community, uh, but at the same time, we need to have other individuals come on and help us. So we need ways to pay them, and so we're starting to charge fees for the courses. But in comparison to all the other resources out there, the fees are nominal. Like right now, our Python class is $100 for a 6 week course. So if you compare that to anything else out there, it's a nominal fee right now.
That is indeed a bargain. And once you learn something, once you have a bit of understanding, and this is just my theory, if you have a bit of understanding about one computer language, you can use that to explore other languages. Uh,
I totally agree. The whole Java explanation, right? Like I am by trade a C# developer, but because I understand the foundation of that language, I'm able to learn Java. Didn't know Python either. Was able to learn Python so we can teach it. So yeah, once you understand the foundation of a language, then you're able to look at another language and just switch up the syntax, which is another big thing with our curriculum, right? Like our curriculum for DevU, we're all foundational. We don't promise you that we're going to teach you full stack. Our curriculum is we're going to give you the foundation of the language because we know that once you have the foundation and the best practices in learning the foundation of the language, you can take those skills and apply them to whatever language or whatever you want to so that you can continue to develop yourself, which is DevU, develop yourself.
Very nice. So, one of the most fun courses I took during undergrad was comparative programming languages. So, we only had to write three programs for the course, but
Mm,
each program had to be written in five languages. And it gave a really good appreciation. And all right, so one of them was COBOL.
Cobalt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it's like, wow, all right, so it is so much more efficient writing things in Pascal or PL1 or I mean anything but COBOL. But
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
for maintenance, the descriptive nature of some of the languages, particularly COBOL, lent itself to being able to be easier maintained. And so part of any programming is maintaining it afterward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do the best practices include things about naming conventions and structure?
Mm-hmm. Naming convention, structure, readability. I'm a big component of your code has to be readable, not only for other individuals who are going to be working on your code, but 6 months down the line, you're going to revisit your code. And if naming conventions or readability isn't a thing that you focused on, you're going to have to relearn your code base in order to work on it. So yeah, those are huge.
Oh yeah, and yeah, yeah. I've done the program. Gee, I wonder if I can get this down to as few lines as possible, and then going back in later. Oh, okay.
And
Uh,
the crazy thing with that is that a lot of the individuals that come to our courses, that is their goal initially. They're like, how can I be the most efficient? How can I be perfect? I want to write perfect code. And so we have to like recondition them and say, like, no, 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 let's take a step back. Like my first rule, Hemory's first rule of programming is get it to work. Whether that's 20 lines of code, 100 lines of code, you got to get it to work. You can come back later and make it more efficient, or you can make it more readable, but the first time through, you got to get it to work in a way that you understand, that makes sense to you.
exactly, exactly. Because so part of IT is always the maintenance, and
Always.
also security.
Mm-hmm.
With coding, things break.
Mm-hmm.
When they break, it's important to be able to read it so that you can fix it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in on-call situations where at 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to try and figure out. All right, so what exactly did they mean in this subroutine? Hmm. Well, they've left the company. Let's see if I can. No, it
Mm.
is all right. The system's down. It needs to be back up, and it needs to be back up within 90 minutes. Go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
readability.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, it seems you mentioned that these are geared toward representation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there is a lack of um, women and people of color in a lot of coding positions, and I'm glad that DevU is out to help ameliorate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So both of us, my best friend or partner and I, 5 or 6 years ago when we got into the industry, we both came through like non-traditional routes. He went through he was a in education, and he called me up and he's like, "Him, I'm quitting my job. I'm gonna try this boot camp thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm gonna support you." And so he went through it, and he was kind of like our pilot for both of us, because it was like, okay, if it works for you and it's successful for you, then I'll just take your blueprint and I'll work that as well. And so it did. It ended up being successful for him, and then I followed, a very similar blueprint, and it became a thing for me as well. And then when we got into technology, we're looking at teams and we're looking at the makeup of these teams, and we're recognizing that there isn't many individuals that look like us. And then I started to befriend, women and women of color, And then we get one or two trickled into there, and then we start to realize, wait, there's not many of you either. We're all minorities in this. And so we started to question, like, why is that a thing? And it came down for us to access an opportunity. Growing up in Flint, we didn't have the access, nor did we have the opportunity to do coding courses. The coding courses wasn't a part of our elementary or middle school curriculum, maybe high school curriculum. And so for us, the only thought was you had to go to college to get into this field. Um, this whole world of boot camps and other alternative trainings has opened it up for us to realize, like, this isn't the only way into the field. And then navigating, taking these courses and then translating that into a position with one of these companies, that's the hard part, right? And so that's what we're trying to bridge that gap. We want to give you the opportunity and the access through our trainings, but we also want to utilize our ability to navigate and our successes in navigating the industry to give you those lessons so that you can also navigate those industries or speak the talk or walk the walk when you're in front of the interviewers.
which is critical. I mean, we were talking a bit before we went live. Everyone needs to be able to do a bit of coding,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whether it is just a better understanding of how they can use the functions and features of their mobile device, or having something like a smart speaker, like an Alexa, in their home. A bit of coding or a bit of understanding about how something gets done is beneficial to everybody.
Indeed. I mean, even if you think about just Excel, right? Like, we all work with Excel documents. Those are just formulas in the background, which is technically code. Those are methods that we're working with. If you think back to, like, Facebook, or not Facebook, MySpace, and what was it, Black Planet, any of those things, right? It was HTML and CSS. Everyone had their hands in code. They didn't realize that they were essentially building websites themselves. Now that has grown exponentially in everything we do. Like, everything has become automated and data driven. So yeah, you have to know some. Even if you're not a coder, you at least have to understand what's going on behind the scenes to some extent.
Exactly. Yeah. And Excel, that's a great point. The running joke is no matter what language is in use at whatever company, the backbone is really Excel.
Right. Excel is so powerful. Like, when I got into development and I started looking at, like, the things that's happening behind the scenes in Excel, I'm like, Excel is coding languages, is working with databases, is querying. There's so many lessons you can learn with just Excel. And those individuals who are proficient in Excel, I am more than confident they can translate that over to any programming language they want to and be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, because, hey, not every Excel formula is an easy one.
Definitely not.
No. Seeing things like recursive procedures inside an Excel program, and then it's like, okay, wait, I have to debug this. So, yeah, it's all a lot of fun, and I enjoy I enjoy seeing others catch that excitement and enthusiasm about it.
Mm,
So whether it is understanding, oh, well, it's just a this, demystifying. So,
mm,
um, my father, because I worked in computers, I was his tech support. I
mm-hmm,
think that's a familiar role for a lot of folk. And
mm-hmm,
as we get ready for the holidays, start having them gather their information so that you can, play the familiar role.
mm-hmm.
But he would call me up, and it was an urgent plea. You have to get over here now. It's like, wait, what's going on? Everything okay? All right. So the TV and the computer were not talking to each other, and the game was going to come on. This was the emergency. It's like, Pop, here's the thing. Uh, you're not. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. If
Mm-hmm.
you make a mistake on your computer, it's not going to result in calamity for the block, the city, the state. It's your computer. So, we can always get you to being able to watch the game, but get in there and try. Don't be afraid to make
Hmm.
a mistake.
It's funny. You sound just like me and my dad, because my dad for the longest had a flip phone, and I refused to get him anything else because it was so simple and he could understand. Like, it was something he could work with. Then we had to upgrade to a smartphone because the flip phone just wasn't cutting it anymore. And I pleaded with the company, like, look, I need this simplest UI that I can work with so I can teach my dad. And so I give him this whole tutorial on how to use his phone. And I'm in Detroit and he's in Flint. So that's an hour drive. And I kid you not, every week, at least once a week, I had to go down to Flint because he had accidentally deleted an app or he couldn't figure out this app, just so that we could walk through and get his phone set up. And I re-explained to him, Pops, listen, you just press this button and you do this thing. That's it. Don't mess with any of these other things here. Like, I wanted to put parental controls on his phone so that he could only be limited to the things that he needed.
I understand. Now, I will protect certain people's identity, but I have close family members that had a flip phone until they were embarrassed out of it. They didn't want to
Mm.
be the only one in their group of friends with the flip phone because, like, all right, fine, no problem. Here's your smartphone. This is all, stay on this screen. That's it. I don't know what happened, but it's like, oh. So yeah, I'm familiar with those conversations. But you know what? It is still fun deciphering, decoding where something went wrong. Because
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you can do that, then you can explain it to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So working in computers, I worked in the computer lab on campus for a few years, and I was very helpful because I had made so many mistakes. You
Oh,
put in a zero instead of the letter O. Oh, yeah, I know exactly what. Okay, fine. Um, in certain languages where things have to be in a particular column, it looks right, but you have a space in there, and it needs to not be a space.
you
If
you
you
hit
make
that
those
you
mistakes, if you internalize it, and then you can help somebody else, and that helping somebody else, that is fundamental to helping other people demystify and have fun with and embrace a bit of coding.
you just dropped so many gems in that statement. There's so many gems that I try to get across to all of my learners. One is the fact that, so we look at senior engineers or engineers who've been in the field for a while, and we look at them as like gods of engineering, right? It's like, oh my goodness, how do you remember? How do you know all these things? And I try to explain to new developers that these individuals are just a culmination of mistakes over many, many years to get to that point. They've struggled the 4 hours, the overnights that you've struggled on these points. The thing is that once you struggle through those things, they never go away and you never want to repeat that process again. And so that's why you know it so quickly, because you've had hours of struggle to get to that point. Like that, like being a developer is the struggle and the experience. It's not an overnight journey.
No, but it is. You can. One of my favorite books, and the author passed away recently. Chihai. Uh, the book is actually named Flow, and I, rather than mispronounce the author's name, look for the book Flow and embrace it, read it. There can be a flow state, at least I've found, when coding. You're working, and the next thing you know, it's like, wait a second, it's been 4 hours. I was just coding this. It's like, oh, and it's done because you weren't distracted. It was work, and it was coming relatively painlessly, relatively easily, where you
Mm-hmm.
were able to structure what you needed to in that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a secret, but it's no secret. Developers generally write a program once. Then from any point on, it's the shell of a program. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you borrow from this. All right, I have the skeleton. Let's build on it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is that still true for you, sir?
Indeed. Again, that's another thing early on, foundationally, that I try to get uh, early developers to understand is that these are all just patterns. Like, once you start recognizing these patterns, you're templating these patterns and you're just repeating the same process. So, if you can start recognizing that, like, oh, I did this over here, but I just reskinned it and used it for a different purpose over here. You start recognizing those things, then you've got one of the foundations of software development, which is don't repeat yourself, right? How do I not repeat myself? Well, I know that I did this once over here and I did this over here. How do I make this so I only can do it one time? Oh, that's a method. Let me go ahead and make that a method. Or there's a boilerplate code, or here's a template. So yeah, going back to what you said, yeah, the whole templating your application, which is why I'm a strong advocate for like having a GitHub account and put in all of your projects and all of your code there, because it's a notebook. Essentially, you go back and you can look through this and you can see where you were or little things that you did, and you put notes in there and you can reuse those little templates of code in future code.
All right. So a question that has just been asked, which is, you know, uh, everything has meaning. The art behind you, would you elaborate on what that art is?
Yes, gladly so. So this art behind me is all original. So my wife and myself, we we started doing this many years ago because I'm cheap. She wanted to do she wanted to do painting with a twist, and I looked at the cost back then, and I was like, "Look, I can get you a bottle of wine. We can go to Michael's or Joann's Fabric. We can get canvases and paint, and we can do this ourselves." And so it started out as a joke and as like a thing for one time, and then every weekend we found ourselves repeating the same date over and over, and then we ended up having lots and lots of art. And so yeah, this is a culmination of our artwork back here.
One of the things I really love about that is doing it for the enjoyment of it. It
Hmm.
is, you didn't look at each other and say, all right, I am like a really good artist, but okay, we can splash some paint around. It's like, no, let's have fun with this and let's paint.
Hmm.
And
Actually, so oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, no, no. Oh, wait, you're both really, really, really good.
Now I
Oh,
was gonna say we have two different styles, right? So my wife is really she likes to paint in the lines, right? Like everything has to be perfect, things can't be mixed. And I'm opposite. Like my painting is sort of a chaos of things, right? Where I don't so I'm colorblind, so I don't see colors well, and so I don't fall into the norms of this has to be that color, and so all of my paintings seem very abstract. If you see some of those abstract, those ones are mine, and then you'll see her paintings where everything's nicely and like it's positioned. And so, yeah, she looks at my art and she gets overwhelmed, and I look at her art and I get overwhelmed because I'm like, it's too cookie cutter, and she's like, well, yours is too chaotic. So,
I understand. Now, when I introduced you as him in the hat. That's one of the ways you are known.
yes.
So, another question: uh, what kind of hat, or what type, and is there a story behind it?
There's always a story behind it. Always. Let's see. So many years ago, I started wearing hats, not fedoras. I started wearing the old newsboy style hats.
Hmm.
So I started wearing those hats. they weren't really my thing, but I was still trying to find my way, trying to find my identity. And then I happened to come across Henry and the Hatter in Detroit, which is a famous haberdashery. So I went in, and it is the mecca of hats. And so I'm looking at all these hats, and I'm trying on hats, and eventually I was like, oh, this is me. And so from that point on, I became a collector of fedoras. And the biggest reason I wear them is because they 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 give me a sense of identity, right? Like it's become a part of my brand. Like anywhere I am, people recognize me because they know that I'm the guy who usually wears the hat. It also helps me with confidence, right? Like it builds, for some reason, it just gives me a level of confidence. And so, um, yeah, like I always wear a hat. And so now I have probably about 40, 50 fedoras. Every time I go to a new city, I have to stop at like the known haberdashery there and buy a hat. And my last, I have to tell this story real quick. So my last, we went to Austin, and I met this lady in Austin, downtown Austin. And she's been in the business for 30, 40 years. She's had it some really big names. Like she gave me, and then she gave me all of this knowledge behind like making hats and what it means to make hats and what it represents. And it was such a powerful like interaction between us. It was like I gotta have this experience everywhere. And so there's like this community. Like when you see someone who has a hat on, like you recognize each other, and you recognize that you're in this like special community.
Absolutely. And I need to make my way down there. I mean, the ads are, for me, I'm still the ads from the radio, you know, with Henry the Hatter and Lewis the Hatter
Mm-hmm.
down on Grand Circus Park. That was where you went.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you
And
look at old pictures of Detroit,
mhm,
like the 60s and the 50s, it's so inspiring because there's not a man on this in the city without a hat on. There's not one. And I'm like, oh my goodness, can we get back to that again? Like I'm trying to inspire that movement.
exactly. And along with that, going to church in Detroit,
Mm,
you had the packed church did not look packed because, man would take off his hat and it would be sitting next to him. The hat
mm-hmm.
had a spot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And did everyone in the church have a hat? Yeah, it was church. You don't
Right.
show up to church without a hat.
Oh, right.
So, what is, you've talked about the rich history of Detroit and coding, and a question for you. What is your story for the world from Detroit that you would like to share?
So, oh man, that's a deep question. I like this. Let me dive in here. Let me sit back. Um, I think my story starts in Flint. So I'm a native of Flint. I grew up. I'm from Flint, and I always have to represent Flint. And then I eventually came down to Detroit. So I think the start of my story, or what I would want the world to know, is that like where I grew up in Flint, like statistically, it was, look, you were gonna end up in jail, or you were going to be deceased, right? Like killed or in jail. Those are the only two options for most individuals that I grew up with. And I look back at, friends or people that I grew up with, and that is very true. And so my thing is that you're not a victim of circumstance, right? Like you don't have to be the environment that you grew up in. You can transcend that. And one of my favorite quotes is, and actually I put this at the bottom of my email, is if you're not happy with the life you're living, change it. And for me, I think that's the truth, right? Like you have the control to change the life that you're currently living. Um, Maybe the circumstances aren't the best, But you can find ways, if you're committed and you're willing, you're going to find ways to transcend those circumstances to get to a position where you are living the life that you truly want to live. And it doesn't have to be what others say, like, hey, this is what I paint success as. You have to define that for yourself. You have to define who you are as a person and what you want and what your values and what your morals are. And then you just go and get it. And so I think I am a definition of that. Like for myself, for my family, that is what and that's my story. Like through perseverance, make it happen. Just make it happen. No excuses.
Absolutely. And see, the thing that I love about that is that's a mindset. It's not a one and done sort of thing. Because as we learn and grow and go through life, we are responsible for our happiness all along the way.
Mm,
So if something stops working for you, all right, like you said, change it.
mhm.
Now, are you open to people reaching out and connecting with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, please do. I speak to individuals all the time. I'm up for connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Shoot me a message if we're in the same city or if I happen to visit your city. Let's hang out. Let's actually connect in real life. I'm all about the connections for sure.
If if they know where you should go and get a hat.
Yes, and if you definitely know where I should go and get a hat, tell me. Please drop that in your city. Let me know where that's at, and I'll come visit. I promise, and buy probably multiple multiple hats.
And see, all right, one of my favorite words is haberdashery because it just it sounds, and you used to see that on stores, but you don't see it as much anymore. So thank you for using that today. I like that word. So, and I invite the audience to make a connection, personalize it on LinkedIn. Let let Henry know that you watched this, you like the hat, you like the art, you're going to take a coding class, or that you're already coding and want to make a difference and learn how. So, him in the hat, Hemory Pfeiffer,
Mhm.
thank you so much. This has been a delightful conversation.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.